What's up, everyone? Welcome back to GameSpot. I'm Mike Mahardy, and I'm here playing Paragon today with Epic Games creative director Steve Supervillie.
Hello.
Steve, there's been a fair amount of new content rolling out for Paragon the last weeks and months. You're here to show us a few new things today, so what can we expect today?
Yeah, so since we launched early access way back in March, the game is updated every week. So we've gone through about 20 updates, released 7 new characters, and changed a bunch of stuff, including menus, some things in the core loop, bounce passes. Basically, as a open beta, everything is on the table. It's a old school open beta where we are looking for the most candid feedback from our players, and we're driving forward to make the most competitive MOBA we can.
Cool. And I understand you have a new character as a support character. Is that one of the things we could check out today?
Yeah, so our new character is Narbash. He is a lane support character whose job it is to play music and usher his team into the battle with a bunch of buffs and some crowd control.
And the thing with Paragon is very much also like a third-person action game kind of too, rolled in with MOBA elements. Can you talk about how he functions in that sense?
Yeah, sure. So when we started Paragon, we wanted to make a MOBA that brought you closer to the action. When we were doing some research, one of the things we noticed was that the cinematic trailers that MOBAs offered you were vastly different from the gameplay that they offered. And so, being Epic Games, we thought our pedigree is making action games, and we can bring those two things much closer together. So with a character like Narbash, he works in lane with his abilities to speed people up, to slow down the enemies, to knock people up, give a healing aura, and one of his most fun abilities is he takes one of his drumsticks and he can chuck it through the air. So lots of our characters leave the plane, right? They will rocket up into the air and shoot missiles down at people, and he could throw a drumstick up and bring them back down to earth.
Cool. And I understand, are we going to be playing kind of a bot match today to show off his abilities and whatnot?
Yeah, so we're going to play a bot match, and we are going to spend some time with Murdock, who's one of our shooter characters.
Cool.
But just because with a support character, you can't really finish out matches as quickly as you would like.
Sure. I'm sure Murdock kind of expedites things.
Yeah.
Cool. And Murdock has functions like a kind of third-person shooter character, right?
Yeah, so he's a third-person ranger. He basically controls lanes by dealing out a lot of damage. He has some traps that he can put down and control some space, so it's harder to gank him. He has ability that pushes people back and gives himself some space. And then his ultimate is Long Arm of the Law, which is a laser that reaches across the map and shoots through geometry and players to hit everything in its path. So one of the things you'll see in YouTube clips, one of our features is a replay system where our community can highlight their best plays and then export them out to an easy-to-view YouTube format or animated GIFs for Reddit. And lots of times you'll see people skeet shooting. So somebody will leap up into an air like Kalaria or Assassin, and Murdock will manage to take a shot that knocks her right out of the air. And
so those sharing capabilities, they've been in effect already before the game's full release?
Yeah. One of our goals was to allow players to learn from each other. MOBAs are really hardcore games. Paragon is no different. And we knew that the best way for players to learn was for them to teach each other. So right from the beginning, we set up a replay system that basically captures the network stream. We store every single game up through the last patch, and players are able to go through, watch the game, and then highlight clips that they want to record, and then export them out.
So what are some other areas that, player feedback throughout the process has kind of influenced development, in bigger ways?
We've had everything. They've given us feedback on menus and rewards. They've given us feedback on the speed of the game. So when we first launched an online test way back in December of last year, one of the criticisms was, combat was a little sluggish. Movement speed was a little slow. Cooldowns were a little slow, and we've ratcheted up 2 or 3 times since then. Try to find the right balance between mechanics of aiming and being true to being a MOBA, which is all about positioning and teamwork. They've given feedback on hero kits and balance. We go through a major balance pass every 3 weeks, and so our general cycle is a major balance pass with a new patch ramp, like version 30, which is out now. The 0.1 version of that patch releases the new hero. The 0.2 version fixes some of the critical bugs, and then 3 weeks after, the next one is 3 weeks, and we're right back into a full bounce pass.
You mentioned Epic Games pedigree, right? And kind of in the past, it's been, Gears of War is the main franchise that comes to mind, and now you're branching into something that still has elements of that third-person action, but it's still very different in that it's a hardcore MOBA. Have you seen a lot of players getting into it because of the third-person angle and kind of figuring out the MOBA aspects as they go?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we wanted to do was make a game that would allow players to experience the magic of MOBAs, all those team fights and the cooperative moments that players craft a story that just doesn't happen without their decision making. And a lot of players had rejected MOBAs for one reason or another. Sometimes it's the top-down clickety-clickety mechanics. Sometimes it was because there are too many heroes. Sometimes there's too many items, that sort of thing. And we set out from the beginning to make a MOBA that people who love MOBAs can play, and people who have opted out of MOBAs for a time could also play. So the action elements of Paragon are definitely one of the things that players have called out as I never got into a League, Dota, or Heroes of the Storm, and I'm loving Paragon because I actually control my character with WASD motion. When I jump into the jungle, I actually jump into the jungle and I'm actually running around. And it adds a lot of a mechanical skill element because our basic attacks aren't auto attacks. You actually have to aim crosshair and have a projectile hit a moving thing in the world.
So to take a step back, I guess, for people who might not be super familiar with MOBAs, like what's going on here? What's he like trying to build up our character, right?
Right. So Nick right now is playing in lane. When you last hit minions, you have these orbs that fly to you, which add card power. It's the little yellow meter on the bottom left of the screen. And that meter allows you to itemize. So when you level up, you get some extra points. Right now he has 3 unspent points. And when he heads back to base in just a moment, he'll be able to buy items called cards, and that will allow him to get stronger. So players in MOBAs have a progression path, and Paragon, just like other MOBAs, have 2 progression paths. One is you level up your hero, which allows you to unlock abilities and level them up to make them stronger. And the other one is the itemization, which allows a counterplay between you and the other team. So lots of times players will realize that somebody on the other team is very tanky, and so they get tank cards that are anti-tank, cards that do more damage or do damage based on the amount of health that the target has, that sort of thing.
And yeah, so speaking from my own experience, when I first got into MOBAs, it was the item progression that was the pretty intimidating, kind of terrifying part. Like, have you done anything to kind of make that a little more accessible with your unique, it's kind of like card system, right?
Yeah. So we have a card system, and just like you said, as we talk to people, one of the most daunting things they would run into is you earn some gold in a traditional MOBA and go buy an item, right? And there are 200 plus items in the shop. And when you buy the wrong one, you get flamed from your teammates. Mm-hmm. And so for Paragon, we thought, okay, how can we make this a bit more approachable for newer players? So what we do is you have a deck of cards. There's 40 cards in the deck. And when you go to the shop, you're limited to those 40 cards. And no matter which hero you pick, we give you a deck that's relevant for them. So if you play a support, we give you a support deck. If you play a caster, we give you a caster deck. If you play a shooter like Nick is playing with Murdock, then we give you a damage-based deck. And so players are able to play a character they find interesting and learn the cards that apply to that character right off the bat. And then as you go, you earn card packs. So as you play, you get time currency called reputation. You buy card packs to unlock. And so the goal is that your options for play grow with your experience in the game rather than throwing you into the shark pool right away.
Sure. And then so jungling is very much an active thing in this game. Like you said, it's obviously the third-person angle lends more to it than like just the regular MOBA character kind of just wading through the jungle.
Yep. So jungling is the path between lanes that is a little scarier because you don't have vision of what's going on. Nick is fighting one of the jungle camps here, and they give power just like killing minions in lane. And so the jungler role tends to be the role that roams around quite a bit. Their job is to get resources from the jungle, which applies to them and their entire team. And then they move up into the lanes to apply pressure and get ganks, right? And so they can show up just about anywhere, and that promotes things like a vision game where you put down wards and you can actually see how players move around, and adds a deep strategic element to team play.
And then the jungle right now kind of illustrates another point about that makes Paragon stand out in my mind is the verticality of the maps. It's down, like the jungle's actually sunk in. There are cliff tops along the edges, the lanes that you can kind of use, like I don't know, there's the character Rampage.
Yep.
And it's that he throws the chunk of earth, right? The boulder.
Yeah, he rips a rock out of the ground and throws it across the world.
Yeah, and I remember the last time I played, I liked him a lot, and I was throwing the boulders from up on the cliffs, and it was kind of like I had a better angle on him. It felt like a third-person shooter action game almost, but I was still like killing minions and like fighting in my lane. Yeah,
that's right. And one of my favorite things about MOBAs is that every hero does something different. You're basically a superhero with asymmetric powers from everybody else on the battlefield, and that makes it exciting because the fun comes in that combination. When you're playing Rampage and you hit somebody with a rock and you stun them, I have enough time and space to realize that happens, and I'm going to, because I tend to play casters like Gideon, I'm going to use his teleport ability and trigger the black hole right on top of the person you just stunned, and he's going to eat it, and we're going to celebrate.
Yeah, and that was the thing with like actions like the boulder toss. It was kind of, it felt like you have to have decent aim. There's skill involved. It's not, it's not a click and an automatic hit.
That's right. Yep, and it's in the 3D space, right? So there's lots of videos, again, using our replay system, where players will highlight their best boulder toss. And so I saw one yesterday that a user had put up on YouTube, and it was a fantastic. So Muriel, who's one of our support characters, she has an ability that allows her to fly to an ally anywhere in the map. And so she basically spreads her wings, because it's just an angel, spreads her wings from where she are, and she takes off across the map like Superman and lands on top of the person she is trying to save, gives them a shield, gives them a little bit of health. And this Rampage perfectly timed this boulder shot that as she came in, she pauses in the air just above her target for half a second. And when she was coming in, that rock was already in the air, and the moment she paused, she got hit in the face with the rock and killed her. It was fantastic.
That is a skill level far above mine.
Mine too. But that's one of the best things about being a developer, because the players always end up being better than us. Like within 2 weeks of launching a game, the community is better.
Do you pretty consistently see players doing things that you didn't even take into account when you were designing the systems, the mechanics of Paragon?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. So Grux is one of our fighter characters, and he has basically these big clubs. And one of the things he can do is slam the ground, and everybody who's in a cone in front of him gets pulled. And when we first launched, we had no idea it could be done, but you can pull somebody from the jungle out of lane, right? He basically would stand below a ledge where he can't be seen, target this pull, and he pulled 2 enemy squishy characters out of lane, over the edge, into the jungle, and then mauled both of them. And by the time their team realized, he had killed them and then run away.
I imagine, they didn't even know what was going on most of the time.
It's pretty disorienting to get yanked.
Well, that's the thing with MOBAs, or I guess, hero shooters nowadays, too. Like, half the fun is learning characters and mastering them, not just for what you want to use them for, but also, to know how to counter them, too.
That's right. Yeah, and MOBAs have the cool added element that your choice is static, right? And so you make your team comp when you get into the match, and then you have to play with it, and the opponents have to play around it, which means you don't get to freely switch and undo a mistake that you made, or pull yourself out of a bad situation. And that means that there's a lot more onus on being creative with what you have.
Yeah. And I guess kind of a loaded question again, because there's been a slew of changes in the last few weeks and months. But can you tell us about any other standout changes that you made that people might notice if they haven't played in a little bit?
Let's see, standout changes. So besides adding all the characters, one of the things we did was fix an issue we had with our economy, which encouraged the death ball. And so our power used to be shared. Basically, if a kill happened, everybody who was in proximity shared an equal amount of that kill. And it basically multiplied the gold, or amount of resources that the team got. And that caused a whole bunch of issues, because it basically said, if you can catch one person out of position, it was worth it for all 5 people. Mm-hmm. And that's bad, right? You want people to split up and come together for a purpose, and then spread back out, because that means the entire map's getting used. So now we changed it so that the last hitter gets 100% of the value, and then everybody else who is around and helps splits another 100%. And so it's always beneficial to be with another person. But when 3 people show up, you're there to accomplish a task. You're there to get a kill and knock somebody out of the battle for a certain amount of time. You're there to take down a harvester or a tower. And it means that the rest of the map is always being used. And that was, again, one of those things that we didn't know if it would turn out that way. And the users made it very clear, players made it very clear that it hurt their strategic opportunity, and so we fixed it.
Well, right, because positioning in MOBAs is almost everything, right?
That's right. Yep.
And I'm assuming this allows you, to facilitate more. I imagine it sends ripple effects throughout the rest of the game in a beneficial way.
Yes.
So now coming up on the.
Yep. So Nick is taking down one of the towers. So this little gem on the ground here is one of the objectives in lane. When you're in tower range, the tower will shoot at minions first, and then at hero second, unless you attack an enemy hero underneath, and then the tower says, hey, you're bad, and it targets you.
Okay. And so Murdock, he's kind of seen a few of his abilities, but for people not familiar with him, can you outline his kind of a loop, if there is one?
Yep. So his basic attack is plasma rifle, like you see Nick shooting over and over again. His square or Q ability is a short-range shotgun blast, which covers a cone and hits multiple targets. he can put down a trap on the ground with his circle once his cooldown is up. And he's out of mana. He needs to use some of his potions. Use some of your potions.
So the card system right now, obviously you have to go back to the home base to purchase new ones?
Yes, you have to go back to the base to purchase new ones. It adds a nice kind of rubber banding dynamic where you have to leave lane in order to get more powerful.
Okay.
And that means the person you're in lane against has a chance to sit in lane and gain a little bit if you've been beating them up.
Okay. And then so for the sprint, the travel mode you go into, were there changes made to that as well?
Yeah.
From what I understand.
Yeah. So when we first launched, we had travel mode, which is basically you click shift or right thumbstick, and you would enter a sprint mode and be able to traverse the map much faster. We also had a penalty where if you took damage while you were running, you would be rooted in place for a short amount of time. And what we found was the experienced players would always cancel out of sprint just before they took damage, and so they almost never got rooted, and they were able to basically get a free engage by doing it. New players always took damage, and they never understood why they're rooted in place, why they couldn't move, why they couldn't do anything, and then they get wrecked because they're being penalized for it. So what we switched to is auto sprint, which as you're out of combat, if you're not taking damage or doing damage in 5 seconds, then you start automatically, you enter that sprint mode. It's still a short-term solution because what we want to do is remove sprint from the game entirely, because one of the challenges that we had learned as we had online tests and early access is it's very hard to get away from somebody who's sprinting up on you, right? They're moving at basically double your speed, and if you didn't know they were coming, there's not a whole lot you can do except fight. And if there's two of them, you're now fighting at a disadvantage. So one of the things we're working towards is removing that feature altogether and allowing players to move around the map in different ways.
Okay.
We are, when I said before in the beginning, like we are an open beta, like everything on this table is, so we are a different game than we were early access 6 months ago, and 6 months from now through open beta will be a different game. So.
And I'm assuming it's fair to say if you didn't have player feedback this entire process, it would be an entirely different game as well.
Yeah, we do what a lot of developers are forced to do, which is guess. Right, you spend 2 years guessing and hoping that you guess more right than wrong, and in the end, players get a game that is ideally good, but not as good as if they were a part of the process. So we set out from the beginning to make a game that was a partnership between developers and community players, and we picked a genre where it's basically not possible to balance without that sort of player engagement. Because when we launch a hero or a bounce pass, I mean, within 2 days. It's gotten more play time than we can do internally just because of the number of people who are playing.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of MOBAs, it doesn't become this like final commercial on shelves product, but obviously, Paragon is approaching its release date in the fall.
Yep.
And at what point do you say, I mean, obviously, like you have a set release date, but at what point do you say, okay, this is ready to at least like say, this is the final product. We're going to keep working on it, obviously, but this beta has pretty much formed this final product. At what point do you just kind of like say this is ready to go?
Right. Well, so we don't actually have a release date, and even if we did, the process wouldn't change. Right. It is always about making a better game, highlighting the issues that we have that are brought up by players, doing our best to smooth them out, adding more content, and allowing the meta to develop and change. One of the cool things is we are making a competitive game, and people have been asking us, when are you going to release? When are you going to be? Because we want to make an esport. We're like, whoa, slow down. Like, hang on a second. We believe that esports or the competitive scene comes out of the players. And so even as we went through early access, one of the things players asked for very early on was the ability to have 5-man groups match up against each other. So we added a very rudimentary beta style system where you can put in a matchmaking key, and somebody else with the same matchmaking key would be put into the match together. And within a weekend, we had our first community tournaments. One of them, Agora's Rising, has run, I think they're on 8 now. They basically run every 2 to 3 weeks. We've had tournaments show up in Germany. We've had tournaments show up in Russia. And it's great. We're still working to kind of get the core of the game locked down. And so one of the best things about it is we now have two camps of feedback. We have the kind of every player who is playing for fun. They're playing with friends. They're They're looking to have an experience where they're sharing stories together, that sort of thing. And then we have the highly competitive people who make spreadsheets and, get their team comps just right, they build their decks just right, and they give us a different type of feedback. And one of the challenges of making a game like this is how do you balance the two, right? You have to have people who can play at the high end, but you also have to have people who can play at not professional level, because they're the people who will watch the hardcore players and learn from them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I imagine that balancing act must be super difficult and kind of catering to both camps.
Yeah, it's fun though.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's the we learn just as much from the highly competitive players as they learn from interacting with us and talking about balance, and then everybody learns from kind of every player because they tend to do wacky things.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're followed poker much, but professional poker players play very different from kind of casual poker players.
Sure.
And some of the magic of poker comes out of the that kind of non-hardcore, non-mathematical play.
Messing with the rules a little bit in kind of unorthodox ways.
That's right. So Nick here is back in our card shop. One of the features of our card system is you buy a equipment card, which is kind of a core card. This one's the Gordon Scepter. It increases damage, and when you max it out with a fully upgraded bonus, you get additional crit damage bonus. And so each card has 3 slots. You kind of get the baseline, and then you can customize which cards go in it to upgrade. So you might have a card that has damage and health, and it will accept upgrades of both damage and health, and you can flex depending on what's happening in the match, how much of one or the other that you want.
And so obviously learning the characters is going to help you select the cards you want for each match.
Yes. So learning the characters will help you select the cards. Again, if you want to experiment with the character, we give you a competitive deck right off the bat, and you can learn that deck. And then between matches, you can go into our deck builder system, and you can build a custom deck for that character where you want to try something that is, I don't want to say unorthodox, but it's specialized. You might want to go an attack speed plus critical damage or critical strike chance deck versus a lifesteal and health deck for a more tanky sustain build.
Yeah, obviously playing against bots right now, but it'd be a little more difficult if you're playing against above average players at this point.
Yeah.
So this is how many, so for the open beta, how many maps have you made available?
So we have just the one map.
Okay.
So we like a lot of other MOBAs, it's basically the field, right? It's the football field, and football and basketball fields or courts don't change.
Sure.
So the magic and strategy comes out from the players and the heroes that you put onto the field. When we were doing some research of what type of game we wanted to make, we didn't know we were making MOBA originally. What we asked people was, when you're playing competitive games, what are some of the things that confused you? And for a lot of the infrequent shooter players, one of the most daunting things was maps. Mm-hmm. Because when a new map comes out, you start confused, right? Yes, I know I need to put crosshair on target, but I have no idea where to go or where I'm going to get shot from or, all that sort of stuff. And so what we observed was most communities would narrow all of the maps down to the one that they want to play, and then maybe another one that they like. And so if it's, Counter-Strike, it's Dust 2, right?
Yeah.
That's the one that you play when it's competitive, and they mix in some other ones. And we saw the same thing happen whether it was an RTS or a shooter or, a MOBA that offers multiple maps. Everybody would prefer one of them. And so we basically said, hey, we're also doing this with a small team. Let's make one map that's good and allows a lot of strategic elements and a lot of replayability. Especially as we add new heroes, they take advantage of different parts of the map and different elements. And then when players, play some and then they go try another game and then they come back because we added new heroes or whatever, they come back not being confused. They might have to learn another hero or two if they're facing in the lane, but they don't have to relearn everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, just watching this and having played it myself and everything, all the changes you're instituting based on player feedback, there are hardcore MOBA elements, but you said in the brainstorming process it wasn't always a MOBA you set out to create. Can you talk about the decision process to get to the point where you said, okay, let's make this hardcore third-person action MOBA?
Yeah, so when we started, it was we wanted to make an online competitive game. That was the goal. We wanted to spend some time learning about what is successful in this space, and when people are playing competitively, what are the elements of a game that really makes it competitive. So we basically spent about 3 months playing games every day and doing what my mom, thinks I do at work every day, which is just hang out with my friends and play games.
I can relate.
Yeah. And then what we spent time with shooters, RTSs. We played board games like chess and Settlers of Catan. We played MMO, PvP, things like PlanetSide, like basically anything that people played semi-competitively, we spent some time with. And one of the things we realized as we came back to work after being at home and also playing games, because that's what we do, the stories that we talked about were largely MOBA related. It was you should have seen this amazing save or this amazing comeback, or we got crushed, but if we had done X, Y, or Z, we could have turned it around. And I can't wait to try this new build, or I can't wait to try this new hero, or we should try this new team composition. And so, even though it is a relatively crowded space, there was so much intrigue about what we could do with a game if we set our minds to it. And again, bringing one of the action elements to it, figuring out ways to improve strategy. So for our card system, on the kind of upper end of play, good job, Nick.
That went pretty well.
On the upper end of play in MOBAs, because all items are available all the time, one of the things you run into is every hero has one, maybe two builds. Because if you ever tried anything novel and clever, I have the item to make that a poor choice available to me all the time. With the card system, and we have a large universe of cards, 300 plus cards, you have to make a choice of 40 to bring in for that character. And if you do something clever that I don't anticipate it, I have to play around it. So you get into this nice tug of war and battle of wills where I'm trying to pull you into my area of strength and you're trying to pull me into your area of strength. And that's where a lot of the give and take, the push and pull, positioning, all that sort of stuff comes out.
Okay, cool. So yeah, gonna jump into another match at all, or we can if you want. It's up to you. We can cut this part, but okay, yeah, sure.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, we can pick up from here, and I can say gonna show Narbash a little bit. Then probably lead into. I don't know. Do you have a tentative roadmap for future updates in the near future?
Every week.
Okay,
update
cool.
Every week.
Awesome.
Yeah. New heroes every 3 weeks.
New heroes every 3
Same,
weeks.
pretty
Yep.
consistent.
Yeah,
Okay.
keep doing that, so we'll be coming up with heroes every 3 weeks, updates all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Small changes, big changes, tweaks, all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Cool. All right, cool. So we are going to check out Narbash. This is the new character, correct?
Yes. So this is our new ogre, orc, drummer, little drummer boy.
Is there any kind of attention being paid to the lore of Paragon, or are you kind of just letting players develop that for themselves while they're playing, and that kind of not super in your face story, but enough to flesh out the world?
Yeah, so there is lore. We actually started when we went to open beta, we started releasing some of it. And if you go to the hero page in the profile, you can see basically 3 bullet points that tell you kind of a little bit of the backstory about each character. We wanted to take a different approach to lore rather than lay out you're here to save the universe, that sort of thing. The best part of superheroes is origin stories and the way they interact with each other. And if you look at comic books or TV shows like Lost, part of the magic is not knowing exactly how all the pieces fit. And so as we get farther and farther into the game's life, what we're going to do is reveal kind of more and more of elements of each of the characters' backstories and their personality. Nick was just playing Murdock, and one of the bullet points about his lore is never mention his wife. Right? And that's players don't really know what to make of it. And part of the conversation on Reddit and the forums has been, what does that mean? What happened to his wife? Is it related to one of the other characters? And that sort of speculation is one of the things that's exciting for people who really, really care about the lore of the game.
Okay.
One of the other things that took on a life of its own, I was talking about Grux before, kind of the big guy who can pull people into lane using his clubs from the jungle, is he's crushed the skull of every competitor in his tribe, but he has yet to defeat his grandmother in one-on-one combat. And so the internet has already flared up with Granny Grux is OP, and they want skins for Grux that are Granny Grux, and people have suggested putting a portrait of her, kind of like the old school black and white portrait of her hidden somewhere inside the battlefield for players to find. Like, it's much more engaging and fun, both as a creator and as a player, to be a part of figuring out the story rather than just having it spoon-fed to you.
That's awesome. Yeah, because it's always a challenge, right? How much do you want to build the world, like just through gameplay and through but how much context you want to give players for what they're doing and whatnot.
Right.
For the people that want to find more lore, I'm sure it's easy to find.
Yes.
But
and the context for people who aren't as interested in lore is very simple. You're faced up against another superhero, beat them down.
Yeah.
Right. Or help your teammates beat them down,
Sure.
and then destroy objectives and win the match. And lots of players don't want or need anything past that. But
Sure.
for the people who do, they're getting the opportunity to really dig in.
Narbash seems a little more nimble than I would have thought for a hulking ogre.
He gets around. Somebody said that to me last week, and I was like, if you look at like NFL football players, they're big dudes. They're going to outrun you still.
Yeah, even offensive linemen still run a faster.
That's right.
40 meters than I ever would.
Yes, exactly. So he is strong, and he's going to keep up with everybody else.
Have you talked much about his kind of story background?
Not a whole lot, because he doesn't come out until tomorrow.
Okay, right. Gotcha.
I'm blanking. I'm blanking on his tidbits.
Cool. Yeah, I guess I could talk more about his abilities, what's going on.
Yeah, we want to talk about crossplay.
And so there is crossplay involved with Paragon if you want to play on one platform or the other, right?
Yeah, so we have crossplay between PC and PS4, and it's a full crossplay. So Sony has been a fantastic partner. We basically said, hey, we'd like to do crossplay, and what we want to do is all of these things. And they went, okay. So we have crossplay between parties, friends lists, with cross progression and cross purchase. So if you purchase a skin or a cosmetic or something like that on either platform, no matter where you play the next time, it's there on your account waiting for you, which is great because our goal is to give players the best experience. And one of the favorite experiences I've had is going to a show like PAX East and having fans come up and say, hey, me and my friend here are playing Paragon nonstop, and it's because he's a PS4 player and I was a PC MOBA player, and I can never get him to play MOBAs before, and now that we can play together, we play all the time. And our goal is to be wherever competitive players were. They are on PC, they are on console, and that's where we want to bring Paragon.
And a lot of times I'm talking to developers who make multiplayer-centric games, and one of the biggest challenges is not just releasing the game, which is hard enough as it is,
right,
but keeping people around. And I imagine the crossplay must help that a lot.
Yeah, well, it helps in two ways. It helps, again, because friends can play together. It also helps with matchmaking population sizes and queue times, where if we had the population segmented, depending on the time of day and the number of players in each of the queues, your matchmaking time would be affected. So right now, for kind of an average player, matchmaking times are in the under 60 seconds, sometimes under 30 seconds. And that's really healthy. And we don't want to do anything to disrupt that.
And being on PS4 and PC, it kind of caters to people who might prefer one control scheme over the other.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter which one you want to play with, whatever your preference is. The game doesn't really favor one input device over the other. MOBAs are about position, right? And while we are an action game, we are also a pure MOBA. And so there are skill shots with using your abilities and landing your basic attacks. However, it's not skill shots like in a traditional shooter where you're trying to hit headshot of a guy who's flying, across the map. You're not bunny hopping. You're not, ducking in and out behind small pieces of cover. It is really about lining up and getting somebody kind of in a position that makes them vulnerable and then taking advantage of it with your teammates. Yeah,
there's skill involved, but it's not like Counter-Strike levels of the mouse and keyboard's going to just dominate.
Yeah. I mean, Counter-Strike is an impressive game and takes lots of skill. Part of the magic of MOBAs is everybody can look at it and go, I can try that. Like that thing that he just pulled off, I have a shot at doing that. And lots of times, again, doing research with people who didn't play shooters at a competitive level because they felt turned off by that kind of increased level of mechanics was I stand at a corner, I wiggle back and forth, and when I see your shoulder, I click the mouse button because I know within 3 frames your head's going to be right where I need it, and that was really a turnoff for them. And so for us, what we wanted to do is provide a battlefield where you had a sense of physicality, you had a sense of space and timing, where players are playing off each other. It's not what we kind of termed accidental teamwork, where we happen to be facing the same direction and shooting in that way, and it makes us feel like we're actually coordinating, but really we're just all trying to, shoot and hit things, and 2 shots equals dead.
Sure.
So instead, what you have here is Narbash, when he throws his drumstick, causes a short stun, and that gives somebody else the opportunity to hit them with a harder to hit skill shot, and you get this chain reaction of player skill.
So obviously he's a support character, but like for someone who is a skilled Narbash player and you're getting toward the enemy tower, what's going through your head right now? What do you want to be doing?
So generally what you want to be doing is zoning out the opponents on the other team. You as much of your presence is felt not just from using your abilities, but by the threat of using your abilities. And so generally you can position yourself in front of your high damage dealers, and you make people pay attention to you, because if they step out of line, they're going to get a drumstick in the face. Or if they push just a little too far forward, you're going to activate your speed boost, and you're going to bring you plus your 2 teammates who are behind you up and into the fight really quickly, and they're not going to be able to get away. He does a really good job of helping people sustain in lane too, because as he's drumming, one of his abilities adds a AoE aura that increases health regen. And so players who are damaged don't necessarily have to leave lane and start losing out on resources. They can kind of hang around and be built up by him as they continue to farm for card power and farm for XP.
It's interesting how you say that, because with a lot of competitive games, like, it's not just, like you said, it's not just the execution of the ability, but the threat that counts. And that's like I guess is a carryover from, like, if you have a star player on a basketball team, sometimes the threat of them is enough to throw the defense off, even if they don't have a big game. That's
right. Yeah, double teams in MOBAs are a very real thing, and sometimes there are characters who just have to double up on, and your abilities, for the most part, they tend to go towards one target. And so if you spend your ability on that one target to gain an advantage, you're now without that ability for a certain amount of time.
I imagine that's a conscious design decision to, have these focused attacks rather than AoE kind of things.
Yep. We want both. Generally, when you're designing heroes, they need to specialize in something. Our goal is to not make a perfectly balanced game where no matter who you pick, they are just as likely to win in every situation. Instead, what we're looking for are heroes that have a very well-defined role, right? And inside that role, they are dominant. And outside that role, that's where you exploit their weakness, and that's where the strategy comes.
That's where it becomes handy to know them, just so you know how to counter them and whatnot.
Yep. That's right.
Cool. And so obviously, like you said, there's no set release date for the final product, but it's very much a living thing right now. A lot of people are playing it, and you're constantly updating it. There's an update every week?
Every week. Every Tuesday, there's a new update, and as of August 16th, we went open and free.
Okay.
So everybody can come in, everybody is able to play and give us feedback to learn the game. The community has spent so much time. It's one of those, like, you're making a MOBA in a toxic environment. Like, our community has made so much content for brand new players.
Yeah.
Reddit is full of hey, if you're a brand new open beta player, here's how you play the jungle, here's how you play in lane, here's a guide for just about every hero, here's how you think about cards, here's how you combo these heroes together, here's the timing of the buffs, here's they've basically just we want this game to be great, and in order for it to be great, people have to come in and feel like they're doing a good job and able to learn. And so they've done YouTube videos and forum docs and spread, like the competitive players have made spreadsheets so that people who are interested in that level of digging in are able to go in and figure things out.
Cool. And Narbash obviously is the next character in a line of releases you've had. And how often do we see new characters with Paragon?
Every 3 weeks.
Cool.
Every 3 weeks we release a hero. All heroes are free. So our goal is that people can play and compete without ever having to spend money. You spend money only when you fall in love with the game, and other than that, we'd just rather have you come in and enjoy yourself.
Cool. Well, that is Paragon, and this is the bot match we've been playing while we show off Narbash, and he's playing Murdock a little earlier. But yeah, so Paragon, every Tuesday there's an update. Every 3 weeks there's a new character. Totally free unless you want to pay money, as Steve said. But Steve, thanks so much for coming out and showing us.
Hey, thanks for having us.
And for more news on Paragon and videos in the future, stay tuned to GameSpot.